external, and then work your way in when you do so. So here's an opportunity to teach about the inspection versus grading. Right, so you can show them, you can pass it around, you can have it on your board behind you, a lot of different, you can give them tattoos. Roll, you can actually get a roll, just roll them. But you want to teach the difference between inspection and grading. This is an important concept for them to understand. And how, you can just give them a brief synopsis of how meat in general works in our country, right? It's typically grown by approved growers, right? They have a system they have to follow, they have to check in. And why do we do that? Have you ever heard of mad cow disease, yes. Right? You can bring up a lot of things about the whys behind it. And still, even though we do all this, there's still problems, right? Recalls. How many of you are on the recall list? You get the emails? It's scary. Maybe you shouldn't be. Maybe we should. But you know, all beef needs to be inspected. No beef needs to be graded, right? And so you can teach that it's an option that the growers can do, and why might they do it? They're betting that their meat is going to be of a certain fat content, and then they can sell it for more. You can share all that stuff with them. But that's before you even break into the package, you can talk about that. Okay, let's keep going. We're going to go inside now. You can teach them about different cuts. Here's where primals come in. You could have I was hoping the Beef Council would have, did they give you any posters yet? Have you gotten those? I thought they were going to try and get, what's that?
I get them every year.
If you contact the Beef Council, they will get you beef posters of primals, and you can have those hung up and show them about the different cuts, how we do it in the United States. Which is different how they do it in Kentucky. No, I'm just kidding. In England, right? Right? It's different. And France, also different. And someone this morning shared that there's a website that talks about, or a video that talks about the different countries and how they do and why they do certain cuts and different things. Yeah.
Australia has a really great website for meat, and it's super, super informative. And you can take little things off of that to help you in your class. I use it a lot.
Nice.
I'll take a 20-ounce cut this year.
You got it. I'll just give you half. Yeah. All right. So then we can have a lot of conversations around this, right? And so there's financial implications. There's environmental focuses you can choose to select. There's profitability and versatility. That's the angle we're going to take today, is how can you be profitable selling beef? Because it's crazy expensive. How much was this? What'd you guess?
How much is the weight? How much is the weight? That much?
16.25.
Is it prime or choice or select?
Choice.
Choice. That's probably 400 to 500 easily.
Yeah, somewhere in 325, somewhere was what I saw on the input. It was actually free to us. Because we're in Texas. And we asked. So that'll be another element I would say for you all, is when you're doing this kind of stuff, don't feel like you have to buy it.
Ask local vendors.
Ask local vendors. You could call, like when I do this, I call Shamrock, and I'm like, Bob, I'm doing a beef demo. He's like, how many? I'm like, 2. He's like, all right, Sancho will be there at 8 o'clock. I'm like, awesome, love Sancho. You. Sancho comes in, sets up, brings the craziest stuff, has fun with the students. I teach while he cuts, and it's such a relief, because one, I don't have to pay for that. It's probably about $800 worth of beef per class. So use that as part of your, right? And again, I'm not breaking down. I'm not doing a demo of a ribeye. I'm trying to teach how you might incorporate this.
And the kids love seeing other people other than us.
Absolutely, they get tired of us so quick.
They don't believe us.
They're
anymore.
such traitors.
Did you guys know Texas Roadhouse actually does a competition with their meat cutters?
Oh.
And I have a friend that's won. They went to Hawaii, his whole family, and they have to know like the exact size,
Yeah,
and
it's a
weight,
thing.
and
Yeah, maybe they come and practice in your kitchen.
that's what I was thinking.
There you Okay, so for this, when I talk about ribeye for our purposes, we're going to focus in on profitability and versatility. Why would we buy a $350 piece of meat, and how do we make money out of it? And for simplicity, let's say we're going to cut this into 10 big steaks, the size you want, right? So at $10 or at 10 steaks, let's call it $300 to make the math simple. How much do we have to sell each steak for?
$90.
$90. When's the last time you bought a $90 steak?
Tomahawk.
Yeah, well, yeah. Not too often, probably. Right? So how do you do it? How do you make money? And that kind of starts the conversation around what do you do as an instructor to teach your students about that. So we look at what can we pull off of here? What are the parts we can pull off of here? Well, first thing we're going to do is trim up our ribeye, our fat cap here a little bit. Okay? So what's something we can do with the fat cap? Render to produce.
Names of fats to use for cooking.
What do we use that for?
Sausage.
Sausage, yeah, you can absolutely do like a big
Candles.
sausage. You can make candles on the frontier. Good. Little house on the prairie, I love it.
Use it to increase the fat content.
Wow, those candles smell delicious.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that medium
You can-
rare?
So many flies.
Okay, what else?
We,
How many of you have had a pie dough made out of beef fat?
oh
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, I
tallow.
So naughty.
Yeah.
So
I think
good.
Mama Toledo's does that in the valley.
Oh, that's the best pie I ever had.
Mama
Strawberry
Toledo's
pie
or-
with beef.
Oh, okay.
No.
Have you? Yeah, you should go there.
Just straight strawberry pie with beef lard crust. You have to eat that alone because you make faces. And you don't want to show those.
And in the dark.
In the dark, yeah, with candles.
Made of.
Made out of beef
Making
fat.
yourself-
Creatures.
Use it as a fat as well, directly for when you're cooking a soup.
Yes.
Use it to fry
Yeah.
your mirepoix.
That's right.
and stuff like
That's
that.
right. Use that as instead of
Or in pudding.
canola oil.
Like if you're doing steak and kidney pudding, instead of using suet, use
Kidney pudding.
Yum. Love it. We talked about canola oil. What is canola oil?
rapeseed oil.
Rapeseed oil. Not very good marketable name. What does canola mean?
Canadian oil acid.
Canadian oil low acid. First time I heard that, I'm like, wow. Random stuff we didn't know. Okay,
Or need
so
to.
now we're not gonna trim this off 100%, I'm just gonna take it down to here, and then we're gonna do our ingredient functionality. So this is the rib section, and it's composed of 3 muscles, and you can see there's 2 sides. There's this side that has this little muscle in here that looks different than this side. Okay. So this is the head side, and this is the tail side. And the little muscle here is called the complexus muscle, and it is delicious. So you should not serve that to anybody but yourself, in case you're in the know. But it has the center muscle, which is the big one right here. That's the center muscle, this big one. And then on the top is the ribeye cap, which is really good. If you ever had the ribeye and you're like eating, all of a sudden you're like, ooh, that piece was really good. That was probably your ribeye cap, right? And then the complexus muscle. So teaching students about composition, right? Human bodies are puzzles. You can pull them apart very easily. Okay, and then I start having a conversation around how would you cook this? Because I think it's really important that we connect musculature in terms of meat with how we're going to cook it. Okay, and I had this very gray area conversation about cooking runners. If you remember that. How many of you know what a sprinter looks like? What is someone who sprints? What do they look like?
Very
A
thin.
Lean.
gazelle, right? Lean. And what do they do? What does a sprinter do?
Runs fast.
Click first of
You
it.
don't need to cook them very long.
4 hours, pounding the pavement, right? So the musculature adapts to that condition and develops a lot of connective tissue inside the musculature that needs to be broken down by what technique? Braising.
Slow
So
and slow.
you would braise a marathon runner.
I wouldn't.
if you ever need that, there you go.
The Dahmer method.
And the goal,
No, this is
the goal here is, what I try and teach my students is, you should be able to look at any animal in the wild, see how it moves, and look at the body part and be like, ooh, that, that, right? And so I use runners because students, it's funny-ish for most of them, like 99%.
Well, because NAU has a lot of runners.
We're our running community. And then, okay, so what does a sprinter look like?
quick,
Explosive football player, think linebacker, right? Isn't that a really muscular? And then, so they run for how long? A minute? 2 minutes? 10 seconds?
4.6.
Okay, so they don't really need much of connective tissue to support that pounding, right? So how would you cook?
Saute.
Saute, right? Real quick, grill. So now, my other thing is, I'm going to share a little bit with you, if that's okay. I'm not a big fan of hummingbirds. They're very aggressive. Anybody know what I'm talking about?
Obviously,
Yeah.
something happened.
Were you attacking?
I was attacking. I didn't talk about it. No. They're very. So I'm actually developing a hummingbird cookbook just to help with my problem and utilize my strength.
Is that your PhD thesis?
Yep, that's my next one. Yeah. So I ask the students. I say, how would you cook a hummingbird? Because now they understand kind of the why. How would you cook the wings?
Low and slow.
Tempura.
Slowest, because
A lot of connective
a lot
tissue.
of connective tissue. How would you cook the hummingbird breast? Sorry if you love hummingbirds. We'll get to this. It's like if you have a tattoo, I'm really sorry. Like,
And a bunch of pet hummingbirds.
what about the breast? How would you cook the hummingbird breast?
Grill it, yes.
Grillers, right? Because they don't really, they just kind of show it off.
Yeah.
Worried by my feeder.
Wrap it in,
Everybody- Does it make
Mark,
sense?
there's a backstory to this.
Yeah, there
wrap it in
You
bacon.
can ask Christina.
Okay.
Okay, so that's kind of a conversation we start with cooking methodologies and ingredient functionality, because they have to understand where something is used and what technique you can apply to it. Have you ever had braised tenderloin? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was- yeah.
They should be like really taught too, because it's not okay. Or grilled short
brisket.
ribs. Yeah, grilled asabuco. Like, and so names matter, right? Words matter, and so you have to understand. We're going to talk about that in a little bit too. But like when you saute something, what does saute mean? To jump. And it's referring to the temperature in the pan, right? And is saute a complete cooking technique? Got quiet.
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
Is searing a complete cooking technique?
For tuna, yes.
No.
Searing, I would argue, is a method within a
It is a
technique,
part of a technique.
right? So when you have
You go to seared
seared
before
tuna, seared scallops, how do you feel about it? I'm just poking the bear, okay? But right, like those are the questions we need to be thinking about. So, tying it back into the beef. So then we talk about the runners, the type of cooking method for the musculature. We identify that this, and then we'll bring a student up to the front of the room, and they become the cow, right? And I'll turn them around, and I'll say, look, here's the chuck, here's the rib, here's where the psoas major is, the tenderloin. I do not touch the round. Stay away from the round. It's sensitive. But you could talk about the round, and so then look at how a cow moves, right? And so they're like, their shoulders are engaged, their round is engaged. They walk around, hey, what's up, right? They chew their cud, right? And so, looking at that, then I'll say, how do you cook this part? How do you cook this part? What about this? What about these? And then they start to get it. So that's a nice way to really connect the technique with the, and then they can go out and look at wildebeest and be like, okay, what is that, right? And they can watch, they watch those wildlife shows a lot differently after that. It's all about cooking. Okay, all right. So then we go in, and then I'll do this. That is the bones, right? So then now we start going in there and talking about different products we can get out of this. For this one, I'm going to remove the bones. We're not going to do any big old bone chops. But, okay, before I get too deep into this, you can have a conversation around tools, right? So here's an opportunity to talk about the different tools we use. So here's our stiff boning knife, right? Typically we use the tip only for most part. Sometimes you use the middle. And there's generally two grips they use. There's the standard grip, and then there's the OJ grip. So you can, and have a little fun with them. Thankfully, they still remember OJ for some reason. They don't know where they were in the big chase, but yeah. So definitely talk about tools. And so here we have one of our favorite zombie apocalypse tools. Be fantastic. So you can go into the history of this knife. Why? Why do we have this in the kitchen? Other than it's really cool. Right, it's a scimitar based on a Middle Eastern sword, and the idea is that you get more knife to cut through the bottom of the beef and things like that, a little more heft, right? You could talk about that. You could talk about steeling versus sharpening. There's a lot of different things you can bring up here if you wanted to. Okay? So, getting back to breaking down the components, because let's just call this whole thing $300. We're going to go down and remove the bones. And what I try to do here is keep the blade right along the bone so that I don't really waste anything. Right? We always talk about extending the yield when we're doing meat or seafood. This is very cold. My other one was nice and warm. This one was cold. How many of you have ever been in a cutting room?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Super cold in there, isn't it? They're all wearing the Under Armour, and it is a lot easier to cut when it's just the right temperature. Okay, so here I'm going to cut through and remove the ribs. You could cut one if you wanted to, cut a chop out of there. Here we go. Okay, so we have our boneless now. So that was a 109, right? And then you can also buy these. I think it's a 109C with the bones removed. I like to keep this on because I use it for a conversation piece. I'm like, okay, what do we do with this? Do we chuck it in the garbage?
No.
How much does it weigh, right? What percentage of the 300 is it, right? So what are the things we can get out of here? You can teach.
Or in Texas.
Yep. So you can cut the intercostal muscle out of here. And what could you do with this? Raise it, right? Cut these out. You could add them to a grind if you had a grind mix. Be tasty. This is the McRib. No, it's not the McRib. That would be nice.
You never know.
You never know. That's
You never
Is there any silver skin on it? Is there any silver skin?
Yeah, you'd have to peel that off. But then you can just show them how much comes off here, right? You could do a yield test. Yeah, you'd want to peel that off. You can also do it after the braise too. So then,
It's like a pretty set Halloween decoration.
yeah, rib crown roast. And then you can flip your students off if you really don't tell them about your stuff. So this is the beef. So, the idea here is, and here you can have a conversation around, it's getting loud. It's a windmill, and then a star, yeah. Here you can have a conversation around making stocks, so ingredient functionality, and you could maybe you're introducing stocks here, like here's one of the components of stocks. How long do we cook these bones for? And you say, 8 to 12 hours, somewhere in there, depending on if they're done or not, right? And then you can have a conversation. So when I do stock, I cook the bones for 10 or 11 hours, and then I add the mirepoix for the last 45 minutes. And then I add aromatics for the last 15 minutes.
Do you roast first?
You can absolutely roast if you're doing a dark one. Yeah, it's preferred.
Yeah, richer.
But it's really what you want. So you can talk about that. Like, why do we cook these? Like, when I was coming up, it was like put everything in the pot, set it for 12 hours, and then come back later, drain it, add ice and water, let it cook for 4 hours, drain it. That's your Remy. That was how we were taught. Then we started thinking about it, didn't we? We're like, why would I cook carrots for 12 hours? Just really easy questions, right? Like, but that's what all our did your chefs tell you to do that when you were coming up, right? Like,
All the
we just
kids
didn't know
in
any
the
better.
When I was coming up, we had a giant stock pot with a tap on, and everything went in it, and it was on the burner the whole time. And the first thing you did in the morning was fill it with water, and everything went in there. So that was back in the 80s.
Yeah, I was in those kitchens too. It was not a pretty. It was a bit dark. We call that
Stuff
the
of the
dark
pot may have been
ages.
there for 6 months.
Yeah, just it's like a sourdough starter.
Yeah.
So again, if we kind of keep going here, we have our bones. We have our maybe we're making a braised rib sandwich or a grind, something like that. Okay, then we're going to come back and we have our lard. So now we already have 3 things that we've generated. This doesn't make sense for every establishment. Can we just agree to that? Yes. Okay, it depends. You have to tell them that. It's not for every kitchen to have to do this, right? And sometimes that gets confused. Yes, it's great, but you have to have somebody that has the knowledge and skill, and you have to have the outlets for it where you can make it profitable. Sometimes it's more profitable to purchase cryovac steaks and sell them. You're not going to get the best yield out of that, but you can be consistent and you can make money. You know what you're going to sell them for. Okay? All right, next I'm going to take some of this fat off the front here, the lip. Okay, what do we do with this?
Use it again.
Grind it, add it to a, make pies out of it, meat pies. Okay, then I'm gonna trim the back of this up a little bit. Again, I'm not gonna go super clean on this for time's sake, but you do wanna teach them about removing the reticulin, the silver skin, and whatnot. And you can even share with them what this can be used for. I learned this from a Navajo chef in Arizona, that this can be used for things. Anybody have ideas of what you use the silver skin for? Anybody?
I'm sure they make a mutton out of it.
Yeah, they actually put it and they extract flavor out of it, but they also make pies
Yeah.
for bags, for anything. So because when they soak them, they simmer them and get them soft, and then they tie it, and then when they harden, they really cinch down. So when the apocalypse comes, you got a little trick there for yourselves.
So other than bread, there's really no use for those.
I also heard bows, like you can actually somehow they make a twisty kind of bow out of it too. But other than that, none that I know.
Nothing edible, right?
Nothing edible, yeah. I mean, I've not heard. Anybody hear anything edible for that? Okay, so then let's do this. Let's take. We're going to take a few cuts out of this. I'm going to trim up this end piece. That's going to be for grind. And then, actually, I'm going to come from this end because that's the good end. I'm just going to cut a couple steaks out of here, about 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches. And then what I'll do is show them if we cut just regular steaks out of here. We're going to go like this.
Can someone adjust that mirror on the right?
Did it fall down again?
It's the other one, sorry, on
Oh, the other
my
right?
Thank you. So you can cut.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
Donnie's gonna tighten.
There you go.
Okay.
It's probably okay. So cut a couple steaks out of there, and show because they're going to want to see that. And then what I do is I typically will make 2 sets of this. So I'll do the identical portions on each side. And then what you can do is teach different cooking techniques. So you have a couple students grill off half the meat, and then a couple students saute the other half. And what that'll get you is it's the exact same cut, but you get completely different results. And you teach about the importance of understanding cooking technique, right? And then you might ask them, which one do you think is better for summer? Grilling or sauteing? Which one's better for winter, right? And then they may have an opinion, they may not. But typically, it's grilling is going to be summer and saute is going to be in general, but not for everything. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to deconstruct this, and we're going to break it down into its smaller parts. And you can see we have on top here the ribeye cap. Okay, that's one of the elements. We're going to break that down. And this is where students sometimes get a little squeamish because they hear this. So watch if they start to pass out. Do you have students pass out a lot in your class? No, I do. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Not since I started brushing my teeth. Much better. But if you think about, again,
Nice dad joke.
I had bad days. If you really think about like the anatomy, it's very much a puzzle. And so we have here, this is the complexus muscle, which is right in here. I'll get that out separately. But this is the ribeye cap. Okay, this it sells in Chicago for probably about $125 a pound. So you don't really want to just include that in with everything, right? So we're going to treat this a little bit differently. We'll get back to you, ladies. Beautiful. And then I'm going to clean this up and get our. There. Okay. Here is our complexus muscle. So this is the complexus muscle. You should save this for yourself. It is a wonderful muscle, and it's kind of spiraled. It's a very different texture, so you can kind of pull it out. It's just a novelty piece you can teach the students about, and it really showcases the difference in musculature and how they feel in your mouth. Much different than main body muscle. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is clean this up a little bit more. And I gotta give credit where credit is due for this demo. If you know Carrie Underley, this morning I said Carrie Underwood, and I got in a lot of trouble. I don't even know who Carrie Underwood, but apparently a singer. Okay, sorry Carrie.
Good job.
But you know Carrie Underley? Okay, she is amazing.
She's in the Pro Star book.
Yeah, we did a demo together.
Level 2.
Yeah, long time ago, and so this is her demo. I gotta definitely cite the sources, so I want to give her super credit for this. Carrie Underley, she has a fantastic book on butchery, and I think it's probably one of the best books for students because it really is visual. So if your students are visual learners, it has wonderful pictures, and it also talks about different cultural cuts. So you have some Cuban cuts, right? Different African cuts of meat. They're like, well, I never thought of that, right? So it's really cool. And this is her demo. So I totally stole it from her, and she knows it. But she's a third-generation butcher out of Chicago. Nicest person you'd ever meet. Wouldn't want to meet her in an alley, though. No, she's so nice.
So, I've already introduced myself to a local butcher, and he is, the shop is very well known. This is in a really small area. It's not highly populated, but it is the place to be. And so I contacted him. He's the owner. He's been doing this since he's 12 years old, his third year. And I asked him about coming to visit to do a demonstration, and because I was more a pastry chef rather than I do both, but I'm not as knowledgeable in meat.
Sure.
What would I maybe ask him to possibly do or talk about?
Yeah, I would maybe share what your goals are for that session and say, hey, I'm really trying to teach,
Okay, gotcha.
whether it's, beef primals, or you want to overview the most popular cuts of meat, right? And where do they come from?
Well, and the kids are the schema of the kids that I'm teaching is very, small. Meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
Plain meat and potatoes, and so they haven't experienced a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I would maybe even ask the students what they want. Like, what would you like to see? Right? Okay, so now I'm going to cut some smaller steaks that without the ribeye cap, and we'll go about an inch, inch and a half. And what you want to show here is that you can still get a nice, cut out of this. Right, a nice, but smaller, without having to go thinner. That kind of conundrum, right? So you can see here, right, it still looks like a ribeye steak, but it's a little bit more petite. Right?
Is inch and a half the?
Yeah, up to 2 inches. After that, it's kind of a roast. But, yeah. And then what I want to show you is how you can come in here and then rather than cut thinner slices, you can do a technique, and we'll do this with the salmon too, but you can come down this way and cut this way down here, lengthwise. And then if you've ever heard of a jet net, it's usually orange tube, and you put the rope in there and then you slide your meat through, and it kind of cinches it up, and within a day or so it will actually take the meat and form it into a round. If you ever cleaned like U10 scallops, you kind of form them and you put like a towel around them or a plastic wrap and it gets them nice and tight like that, so they sit up high. It's the same thing, but it'll actually form from this kind of angular cut into a round cut by the pressure of the net that goes around it. It's called a jet net.
You'd sell it as a fillet.
Yep, sell it as a petite fillet. Yep. So here I'll cut a few of those, right? But it's also, I think, there's a few names for this type of steak like that. Petite ribeye fillet. Serve that with a little salad or a little surf and turf, right?
Just call it a mini ribeye.
Yep, mini ribeyes.
We were just discussing the truth and menu part of it.
Yeah.
You can't really call that a fillet if it's a ribeye, so the nomenclature.
Salmon fillet.
But fillets, it's, to the tender.
Filet mignon. Yeah. Yeah, you have to be truth in advertising for sure. We're gonna talk about that in a bit too.
Oh, it's because there's no bacon on it.
True. So here's so we have now let's see, who's getting married? Oh, congratulations. All right, so you're getting married and you're gonna have 250 people at your wedding, and I'm gonna be your chef. And we get your menu going, and you want a carving station, and we have beef tenderloin. And it's $23.95 per guest. And you're like, yes, 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 yes. You say yes to everything because you had a lot of champagne. Then you look at the total price and you're like, no, 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 no. And that's when the chef really needs to come in. This is where you start doing business, right? Before that, it's just pretty stuff. Like if you buy it, great. But now the chef, this is what you have to teach your students is how do you make money? And what you can do is trim this up and serve this as a carving station. So a ribeye carving station, I can sell this to you for $14.95 per person. And you say, awesome. You just saved me a lot of money. The trick to this is I'm going to make more money selling this at $14.95 than the filet mignon at $24.95. That's what you really, the heart of what you want to get at is that you can sell all the fancy stuff in the world, but your profit margin is really what you want to get at. What is your profit margin? It's not about price, it's profit margin.
Make that money.
Make that money. So that's then what I do is I'll have, they'll grill this off and we'll do a little carving station with it. And then I also, during this demo, I'll talk about cooking techniques. And we'll get pretty controversial. So we're gonna cook this steak, okay? Great. I'll have a griddle, and then I'll have a grill. And I'll teach them how to grill, and I'll say, okay, when you put this on the grill, you're gonna lay it down at 45 degrees, right? And then I ask them, what do you do next?
Leave it alone.
Leave it alone.
And after it's there enough time, what do you do?
Switch.
Rotate it 45 degrees.
Return it.
That's what you do. What do most of the students say?
Turn it over.
Flip it.
No.
No. You pick it up, you go in there with whatever technique you use, you pick it up, you turn it 45 degrees, and you place it in a new spot, because you've already sucked the heat out of those bars. So then you get a nice hashtag beef, right? Stu's like, I don't know why I like it. I think that's funny. Right? You get your hashtag. And then you flip it. And then a lot of them will be at that point texting generally their dads, but not always. Like, Dad, you don't know how to grill. Because what do they do at home? After the first one, after that first grill mark, then they flip it.
And then they mash it.
And then they prep, then they step on it and like,
Yeah, elbow.
don't play with your meat. That's kind of this thing, right? Like, just don't do it. It's a thing.
You can't say this.
But the reason you can't.
Can't say that.
Okay, sorry. Okay. So you lay it down, and then you pick it up. You put it at 45 degrees on the same side, the other spot, because you've already spent that much time and energy heating up that other side. If you flip it over, all that goes away, and then you have to start all over again, right? So the idea is keep it on that side, and then now you can, at this point, when you're done this side, then you can